Ella, welcome. And I would want your expertise in making us understand what is this mediation, how is this structured, how the organizations can make use of mediation for dispute resolution. Over to you, Laila.
Thank you, Jaya. Thank you very much. To begin with, mediation is an informal process, and I'm very happy with the virtual world that is happening now, but I wish I could physically see all the participants here. I mean, that's something which I miss. But anyway, we have to make do with what we have. So my objective would be to explain mediation and how we distinguish it from the other dispute resolution processes. I said mediation is informal, but I also want to tell you that this is very much a part of the legally recognized dispute resolution process. Our Civil Procedure Code was amended in 2002 to provide for mediation. We are in the process of drafting a law for mediation, and internationally, India is a signatory convention, which is now bringing in mediation as a formal process for cross-border disputes. So this is very much part of the formal dispute resolution mechanisms that are available in the country, but it's an informal process. So why do I say that? Jaya, I'm very impressed that 40% of the cases sexual harassment cases are being addressed. That's a big step through the formal process. Now the question is, how do we bring in the remaining 60% so that the workplace is an absolutely safe and stress-free environment? And that's why I want to go into this process, mediation. Mediation is called an understanding-based process. This is different to the adversarial process. Adversarial is where you keep the parties as opponents and decide who's right, who's wrong, what is fair, what's unfair. Adversarial processes. All our other dispute resolution processes are adversarial. Conciliation, of course, we'll deal with that later. Mediation, understanding what? Understanding what are the needs of the parties, the needs, the concerns, the pain points, goals, priorities. So the entire focus is to understand the disputing parties, and based on that understanding, help the parties find their own mutually acceptable solutions. So if you permit me, I'll say a simple story. This is a simple story, but I hope it's not construed to be simplistic. This was a story that was when I did my mediation training at Harvard, and this is the story that was used to introduce mediation. So permit me to say that. This is a story about two sisters fighting for an orange. One sister A, wants an orange, goes to the fridge and finds the last orange there, picks it up, and her sister comes running and says, "This is my orange." And of course, this is mine, it's not yours, and it's not mine. This fight continues. It's getting difficult. The mother comes running. Now, the mother has an opportunity to be a mediator or an adjudicator. Adjudicator is a judge. If she's an adjudicator, she'll take the orange from both the daughters and she will tell them, okay, tell me why you think this is yours and why you think this is yours. And she will listen to the merits of the case And possibly she'll say, okay, both of you are my children, so I cut the orange half. This appears to be a very fair solution to many of us. I'm sure many of us do this to our children. I did at least. But not since I learned to be a mediator. If the mother is a mediator, what does she do? First, she tries to calm the two daughters. She takes them out, makes them a cup of tea, seats them down, and then she'll say, daughter A, can you help me understand why you need this orange? And the daughter A might say, mother, my fiance is coming for lunch tomorrow. He loves this dessert that I make, and the recipe says it needs the juice of one orange. Then the mother will ask the other daughter, daughter B, can you help me understand why you need this orange? And she may say, mother, I'm taking part in a drama competition tomorrow. You see all the pimples on my face. My friend said that if I make a paste with the skin of the orange and put it on my face, the pimples. When the mother explored why the two girls wanted the orange, when she understood why they are fighting, what was their need, she was able to find a solution. One orange became two oranges. One took the juice and the other took the skin, and both were 100% satisfied. Of course, I know you may think, what if they both wanted juice? Well, when the process is informal, when the process can be flexible, can be creative, one daughter can say, you know, I have the recipe, grandmother's recipe for a lovely dessert. It has a pineapple, and I can give you a pineapple. I grow a pineapple in my garden. I can give you a pineapple. Or the other one can say, you know, I have a coupon for a beauty parlor which can get rid of your pimples in a day. So they exchange what they have extra or what is not so high in their priority. Trade-offs are created, and therefore value is created. It is value claiming and not, value creating and not value claiming. This is the principle of another kind of negotiation or bargaining, which we call interest-based bargaining. So that's why we call mediation understanding-based approach or interest-based. And interest, the language in mediation, interest refers to any concern, any need, want, goal, priority of anybody. The process is based on that, and therefore the parties are led to find their own solutions. So this is simple. It's not simplistic. This is the approach that is used in whether the dispute is a commercial dispute, a matrimonial dispute, political dispute. It is the same process of interest-based approach that finds the solutions. In fact, our courts now, you cannot file a commercial complaint unless you go in for mediation before filing the complaint. So the legal system is more and more recognizing the need for this interest-based, understanding-based approach. So what are the essential elements that distinguishes mediation from the other dispute resolution processes? One, the process is conducted in a manner that makes the parties feel safe to share information. And why do I say that? One, it is conducted by a neutral third party. A party who that neutral does not have any personal, professional or commercial interest with either of the parties. So both parties feel very safe to share information. Again, that neutral, unlike in other processes, does not have the power, authority to impose decisions. The judge is a neutral in court, but he imposes decisions. But in a mediation, that neutral does not have authority to impose decision. There's no, who's right, who's wrong, what is fair, what is unfair is not addressed by that part, by that neutral. So the parties feel safe and everything is conducted in a confidential environment. Parties have opportunities to share information privately, confidentially with the neutral third party or with the mediator. The parties sign to a confidentiality agreement, which is very exhaustive. Any information gathered at mediation, any proposals made, any concessions, confessions, none of this can be used against each other in any judicial or quasi-judicial process. So parties feel safe because the mediators are neutral, and also mediator creates an environment, a space where they're not going to be judged, they're not going to be evaluated. It is confidential. They can share information comfortably. In the process, the mediator gets a real understanding of what the parties are experiencing. To talk about conflict, there is an interesting story. I'm sure most of you have heard this. It's about the three blindfolded men who feel an elephant and then try and explain what the elephant is. One says the elephant is a tree. They just felt the leg. That person felt only the leg of the elephant. The other says the elephant is a mountain. It just felt the body of the elephant, that person. The other said elephant is like a snake. It depends, each in a conflict. This is what happens. Each person is looking at the conflict from their own vantage points. They are seeing only what they are seeing. And there's a Harvard study which has shown that 90% of the conflict happens because parties are genuinely seeing things differently. One is actually seeing an elephant and the other is actually seeing a trunk, a tree. You need a third person who's there to help them explain what they are seeing. And when they explain that in a manner that they are comfortable, they feel safe, the mediator is able to see where are the gaps. Why are they not seeing the whole picture? The mediator then is able to fill in those gaps. For example, why not we get a survey done? Why not we bring in the registers and really see what happened? Bring in the pay officer. These are things that we do when we do, employment disputes and things like that. So from, the mediator is able to throw light on the whole picture, get this information, and then help the parties to find a solution. So the first element why it is distinguished is because the safety of the environment that's provided in mediation is very different to any other dispute resolution process. The safety to give information. Secondly, this process shifts the parties from the past focus to the future focus. Every other dispute resolution is past focused. It's retributive. But mediation provides the opportunity to parties to explain, to vent, to shine light on the whole picture, to diagnose the problem, to understand what is the source of the conflict. And then this mediator, who's an expert, is able to shift parties to draw a line from the past to the future. how do we forge an agreement where both of you can continue to work with each other? Or how do we forge an agreement where you can go separate ways? So by this learning, by this understanding, they handle the emotions, handle the past, and shift the parties to the future. Third element, the mediator helps the parties to find mutually acceptable solutions. Mediation is assisted negotiation. Parties have to find their own solutions. But now there is enough information in the room. Mediators been able to throw light on the whole elephant. So they now know what the whole picture is like. They have been mediators trained to handle emotions. Once all that is handled, the mental framework is shifted from the adversarial to the collaborative solution focus. At this point, they are able to find mutually acceptable solutions. Mediation does not resolve unless both parties are able to find solutions that they are comfortable with. So this is future focused. It is, from the past to the future, and they find their own mutually acceptable solutions. Less than 1% of the disputes that are mediated and settled reopen. Why? Because parties have found their own solutions. They have worked towards their own solutions. They've worked hard. And finally, when they do agree, it is something that they comply. Very rarely does a mediated settlement reopen. So these are the factors that distinguishes mediation from other forms of dispute resolution. And what are the long-term benefits of a process like this? When employees go through a process like mediation, they learn communication skills, problem-solving skills, and they come back. Jaya, are you there?
Leela, just disconnected, but you're audible still.
I can continue?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. So they come back with new skills, communication skills, problem solving skills. I had a situation, this was a British company, new CEO comes into the company, heads of two departments are really not able to get along with each other. And this CEO was so frustrated, she contacted me, and finally we brought both these parties in. We worked with them, mediation, and what did we do? We helped them to communicate with each other. One was a man and the other was a woman. So they were on the verge of sexual harassment complaints and all kinds of complaints. But actually what was happening was this and a timid female were not able to communicate with each other. So in mediation, they learned how to communicate with each other. The female employee also learned to shift from a victim role to a player role. We also set in place complaint mechanisms so that the complaint reaches the CEO much later. They don't go running to the CEO. So there were many, we were able to understand why there was this friction and what was required to help them once again function comfortably with each other. So that's the benefit, a long-term benefit of using a process like mediation. Secondly, large number of these, 70 to 80% of the mediations result in a settlement. And there is compliance. we follow up. In case there is difficulty, the mediator continues to follow up. And especially in workplace disputes, mediation is a very good process because most situations there are creative options available. For example, changing the timing or changing the role. Creative options are available for parties to readjust. And most often, these people don't want the complaint, the difficulty or the grievance to continue. They want to end it. There is a desire to resolve. So for workplace complaints, mediation is a wonderful process. I hope I've been able to communicate to you why mediation stands apart or is different to other dispute resolution processes. One, the neutral, safe environment where parties can trust and share information, comfortably share information. Two, in this process, from past focus, after going into the past, they move into the future and they're able to forge an agreement. Third, they find their own solutions and therefore there is compliance. There it is reformative. There is learning in the process. There was one mediation. It was between a doctor and a patient, and the patient was very unhappy with what happened in her procedure, and doctor offered to pay money to make amends, but she did not want this experience to anybody else to have this experience. So one of the terms that was put into the settlement was that the doctor would do an additional training in this procedure. So it is a process where there can be enhanced learning, and that's why we call it a reformative process, not a retributive process. So I'm open for any questions later whenever it's relevant. Jaya, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Leila, for so much of information about mediation. Thank you. So one common question that most of them, I'm sure, will be also thinking right now is, can HR mediate into cases? Now that we have seen that mediation is outside the purview of IC, and it's an independent which can handle these complaints. So can the
Yeah, there's a bandwidth issue. I think keep your video off, only the audio on it should work.
Yeah, so can you hear me, Leila?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. So the question that most often comes to us is, since mediation is an independent of IC, it's outside the purview of IC, and it's an independent body which investigates. So should the mediation be always done by a third party, or can HR themselves mediate and solve an issue?
That's a good question, Jaya. You know, mediation is a skill that really helps you through many situations. In fact, I remember my children, after I did my mediation training, they said, if only you had done this earlier, because by then my children had grown up. So mediation is a life skill. And I'm sure HR they are receiving many complaints, issues. Definitely, they can use these skills. But the HR should be vigilant. If they feel that this is something which is better handled by a third party neutral, where the parties will share information better with a third party neutral, then they should use their discretion and move them on to a third party neutral. So it's something, it has to be filtered. Complaints have to be filtered. Discretion has to be used. When is it appropriate for the HR to handle themselves? When should they send the complaint to a neutral third person.
Okay. So, yeah, so many times, suppose it's a sexual harassment case. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
So whenever there is a sexual harassment case and the woman comes and talks to HR and says that, see, I have an issue like this, but I don't want to go in through a formal structure. I just want my problem to go away, but I don't want a committee handling it, 3-4 people coming, talking to me, documenting, and I'm not very comfortable with that. So most of the times the HR are scared to handle, especially if it is a sexual harassment issue and the lady doesn't want to go to an IC because it is a very sensitive matter. So do you think mediation can provide resolution in such aspects?
Yes, definitely. And in a sexual harassment kind of dispute, if it's not got into the ICC and the ICC feels that this, prior to the ICC getting involved, if it comes into mediation, there will be 3 parties at that mediation. One will be the so-called alleged harasser, victim, and the organization. There will be a representative from the organization who would be part of the mediation, may not be privy to all the discussions, but will be brought into the fold of the mediation. A mediator will design the mediation. We call it, designing the process. When we convene the process, we design it. And when we design it, we look into how best the mediation will be productive. If we feel that there should be just private sessions alone with one person, or it should be joined, or when we should bring in the HR or whoever is required, we structure it in that manner. But yes, to answer your question, it can certainly be mediated.
Okay. Thanks, Laila. So,
but as you mentioned, Jaya, at the beginning, prior to the written complaint, is absolutely fine.
Okay. So yeah, so the next question was that see, since there is no law as of now on mediation, so how does it work? In the mediation also, do you look at principles of natural justice while handling cases, or is it basically focusing more about bringing about a settlement? What do you think, Laila? How is it different?
See, in a ICC, it is principles of natural justice. That is, parties should get fair hearing. No man can be a judge in his own cause. These are the 2 principles of natural justice. And why is it required? Because that ICC is going to take a decision. But in mediation, it's not a decision. You need an environment which is neutral so that the parties can share information. So to that extent, you need a safe environment where parties share information. But the principles of natural justice are for a process where a third party is going to take a decision which will impact 2 people. Since a mediator does not take decisions, principles of natural justice are not required. A neutral, safe environment is what a mediation creates, so that parties can take their own decision.
Okay.
Have I answered that?
Yes, thank you so much, Laila. So yes, naturally, people do get doubts on whether the right to approach an IC ends once mediation process starts. I mean, so once a person has approached for mediation, like if the parties have agreed to go in for a mediation to settle their disputes, does that mean after that they cannot go to an IC? Or does it mean that all options are still available for them in case things don't work out through mediation?
So mediation is done in a manner that it does not prejudice any trial or quasi-judicial proceeding, judicial proceeding subsequent to mediation. If mediation fails, the mediator only indicates not settled. Everything said at mediation, even the fact that it happened, can be kept confidential if that is what the parties or the management wants. So mediation is only a detour. If it doesn't work, they go back into the ICC and follow the process absolutely without any prejudice to that proceeding.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Laila. So now another question that I had is that there are certain, so when a case or a dispute reaches HR, so HR now has to listen to the entire context of events by the victim, and then she uses her discretion to figure out when to put it for mediation and when to put it to the IC, and helps victim make a choice, on how to go. Now, what are the kind of cases that HR should absolutely not send it to mediation? How do they make that judgment, Laila?
Okay. See, mediation should be a decision which the parties really want. If the parties want a formal process, though the HR feels a mediation is a better process for them, it should go to the formal process. Because if the parties want a formal process, that cannot be denied to them. However, if the parties want an informal process, then the HR uses their discretion, guides them. If you find that there is a habitual offender, these are spaces that you need to use your discretion. Or if you feel that this victim will be unable to participate in the process because the offender might be a bully. Of course, mediation does have techniques to correct power imbalance. We use several techniques to correct power imbalance, but it's very much the discretion of the HR to say, no, I think it's better, more important that it goes to ICC, then it should go to ICC. So okay. HR has a very important role to play there.
Right. So, Laila, suppose there is a contract employee, right? Or maybe someone who's a fresher who has been sexually harassed by a very senior person in the organization, right? Now, there is definitely a power imbalance, and the HR knows that mediation involves negotiations, right? So if the HR feels that, okay, this lady is too young to negotiate for herself and bring about a settlement, and the other party is too senior enough, too matured enough to manipulate. So in such a case, what you're saying is the HR should use the discretion and ensure that it goes to the formal process instead of sitting for mediation. Is that right, Laila? Or
in the given example, I might the HR, because the mediator has ways to correct that power imbalance. I might say that when it comes to me and I notice a power imbalance, I might talk to the employee and ask her, do you feel comfortable having this negotiation with your boss? And she says no. Then I might say, how do you think you can feel more comfortable? Can we bring your lawyer in? Or can you bring your mother or uncle or father or somebody who will help, who will correct that imbalance? But with all that, if I feel that the imbalance is too much, she's not able to negotiate, the ethic of mediation is I say, no, I think we should not continue this mediation. I terminate the process. But remember, mediator has ways. Mediator will always, as I mentioned earlier, you design the process. So right in the beginning, I will be examining for power imbalance. And if I feel there is power imbalance, I will try and correct that power imbalance.
Okay, super. So now coming to mediation, does mediation also provide any punitive damages? Like say, when I say punitive damages, they are basically awarded in addition to the actual damages in certain circumstances. And punitive damages are considered like a punishment and are typically awarded at the courts or maybe the IC's discretion when the alleged harasser's behavior is found to be especially harmful. So now, does mediation also provide any punitive damages, or is it basically bringing about settlement between them?
See, as I said earlier, Jaya, this is not retributive justice. The mediator does not award damages. But sometimes we find that one party wants the other to be punished, or one party wants the other to improve his behavior. So one of the terms of the settlement maybe she might say, do ABC. She has a discretion, or whoever the other side is has the discretion to impose a term in the settlement, which could be punitive, which could be compensatory, which could be anything. And parties have to agree. If the other person thinks, okay, I'll give an apology, and this one wants an apology, then we help structure the apology. So it's not about punitive, but it's about what the parties want. If they think it's important, then they ask for it and they get it, if possible.
Okay. And so after a settlement has been arrived at in a mediation case, in a case which is mediated, once the settlement is arrived, what if any of the parties fail to keep up with the settlement agreement? So is it binding on them that they have to follow, or if they break, if they don't follow, what happens?
A mediated settlement can be equivalent to an arbitrator's award under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. And I'll tell you why. As I mentioned earlier, if parties arrive at a settlement, there is a 99% chance it will be complied with because it is self-determination. They have worked it out. They have worked hard towards it. They comply, and they only agree if they can comply. So that's why 99% or more of mediated settlements are complied with. But there is always a 1% which we need to ensure. Under the law, now there is a mediation legislation that is coming up, and then all this will not be required. But currently what we do in private mediation is mediation and conciliation are considered to be synonymous under the law. There is a judgment, as we call it the AFCON's judgment of the Supreme Court, which says mediation and conciliation are synonymous. A conciliator's award is equivalent to an arbitrator's award under the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. So what we do is we call this process conciliation, and the settlement agreement becomes a conciliator's settlement agreement. So this is what we do in all our private mediation cases where parties want that additional 1% possibility to be covered. We convert it into a conciliator's settlement agreement, which is equivalent to an arbitrator's award, and I would say better than an arbitrator's award because chances of reopening is way less compared to the arbitrator's award. Have I answered you?
Yes. Yes, Laila. Thank you. So my next question is on the confidentiality part. Like if you look at the POSH Act 2013, Clause 16 of the POSH Act specifically talks about the need to maintain the confidentiality. So that means no parties that means I'm talking about the victim, the alleged harasser, the employer, the IC members. No parties can share or publish any details of the proceedings to press, media, or public in any manner whatsoever. Now, when we are dealing with a case through mediation, how do we maintain this confidentiality? Because at least for IC, there is a POSH Act protecting, people of the confidentiality. But in mediation, how do we maintain the confidentiality while dealing with issues?
In private mediation, before mediation starts, parties enter into a very extensive confidentiality agreement where they agree to exactly the same things and even more. It's a wide scope, so that prevents them from disclosing it, and they can even agree not to, through agreement they can say that they will not disclose it to the public. Even the fact that a mediation happened will not be disclosed. The outcome of the mediation will not be disclosed. Anything that happened, all that can be entered into through an agreement. Secondly, the Evidence Act of the law of the land says that if anything is meant to be confidential in a settlement negotiation, it has to be confidential. So both these factors will cover confidentiality completely of mediation. It will be as good, in fact, even better, because in mediation, parties can privately share confidential information with the mediator. So to that extent, there's a wide scope for confidentiality in mediation.
Okay, so we've had one of the participants, also ask us, who will bear the cost of mediation process? Is it the company or the parties involved in the mediation?
See, in a workplace dispute, the normal practice is when we have our commercial disputes to commercial parties or matrimonial disputes, parties share the cost equally unless they otherwise agree to. So in workplace disputes, we see the management taking care of the costs, at least a large part of the costs, but they can agree to otherwise.
Okay, so so a lot of so there is a, so do you suggest that HRs need some kind of a training in mediation? Is it a specialized skill, or is it or is the mediation skill something that can be acquired only into looking at things differently? What do you suggest?
See, a mediator uses several skills: psychology, communication, negotiation. Several skills are required to really work with media. How to handle emotions, how to get information, the legal perspectives. So there are several skills required to be a mediator. It's good if the HR is trained, because when required, the HR can use these skills.
Okay. So, so if I want to be a great mediator, Laila, what are the top 3 skills that you feel is absolutely necessary for me? Only then I can probably even think of mediating any case.
Communication skills. Absolutely important, because you have parties, communication between disputing parties have broken down. The first casualty of conflict is communication. It is the mediator who builds that communication. How do you build it? What are the ways of building that communication so that mediator has enough information to shine on the whole elephant, on the whole picture, to be able to help parties understand what the other is seeing? So, communication skills. Next, negotiation skills. When there's conflict, intuitively, we get into a very competitive way of negotiating, claiming value. This orange is mine, that is mine. Instead of that, to be able to unearth the need, concern, goal, priority. How do you unearth all that and then integrate it into a mutually acceptable solution. This is negotiation. It doesn't settle unless both are comfortable. So how do you unearth all their needs, interests, concerns, goals? How do you prioritize it so that you can create trade-offs? This is an advanced form of negotiation called integrative bargaining. The technique that is used in this negotiation is called integrative bargaining. So communication skills, negotiation skills. How do you handle emotion? There's a lot of emotion in conflict. So the ability to be able to shift parties from an adversarial framework. There is neuroscience involved. When parties are in conflict, when they are agitated, it is the limbic brain that is impacted. And when they are responding from their limbic brain, is very emotional. So we have to shift them from that kind of a response to a logical, reasonable, thinking of the future kind of response. So these are, I think, if you ask me, top three: communication, negotiation, being comfortable with emotions.
Okay. Thank you, Laila. So is legal knowledge also required to kind of be a great mediator?
That's a good question. It's not as if all the mediators in the world are lawyers. Having said that, negotiation in mediation is under the shadow of the law. So what I mean by that is, when parties come to the mediation table, conflict has already happened. If this doesn't work, they will go to court, or they'll go to the ICC. They'll go to a formal platform. Any decision taken in this informal process has to be based on what possibilities are in the formal process, in the legal process, because that's your plan B. You don't take a decision to buy a house without knowing what your plan B is. You go and see several other houses. Similarly, it is a mediator's job to help parties take an informed decision. The mediator has to bring out all the possibilities that could happen in courts, where your evidence is weak, where your evidence is strong, what is the case law on this. To be able to bring out those things, you need some amount of legal testing.
Okay. And so now for the POSH committees, Laila, we have timelines, time limits, basically. So like, for example, 90 days is the time that the IC has to kind of get through with a complete investigation and all that. So is there a time limit for settling disputes under mediation as well?
It depends on the parties. See, as I said, it's a voluntary process. Mediation is a voluntary process. Parties can decide to walk out anytime. Again, this is one factor that distinguishes it from other processes. The parties can terminate the process at any point of time. So if they feel, they come for one day of mediation and they feel this is really not working, I'm not comfortable with the process, they can just walk out. They can walk out of the process anytime they want, or they can tell the mediator to 1 month, at the end of 1 month, I walk away from this process. So they can decide their time limit.
Okay, great. And we also have, one more participant who was asking, is mediation settlement the document that you create post this, the mediation? Is it relevant in case the female files a criminal or civil, file after mediation process? So is it valid in the court of law?
a mediated settlement, unless they agree that that is also confidential, it can be used. If there's a settlement that's agreed to, they sign on it, then it becomes a contract. If the conciliator settlement agreement, it becomes equivalent to an arbitral award. But if the parties agree that this document will be confidential, then it will be confidential.
Okay. So Laila, we were just inquisitive to know if you can share any one of the disputes that you handled basically in an organization related to maybe something which is very close to a sexual harassment case. If you have any case study, would you be able to share it with us? Which shows like how mediation did help organization in settling a dispute between a man and a woman, which is on the verge of a sexual harassment or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Two department heads. One was the male and the other was the female. And the male was a very aggressive kind of person, and the woman was timid. And you know the definition of sexual harassment is very wide. So she was on the verge of filing a sexual harassment complaint against this person. But at mediation, they worked out how they are going to be relating to each other. They had honest conversations. In fact, I had to bring her in separately. So we structured it in a manner that when the first time they came together, first time she came alone, he came on another day. Then another time they both came, but I kept them in separate rooms. I made sure that they meal times were not together, no contact. But you won't believe it, by the end of session 4-5, we were sitting on the table together and they were discussing how they will communicate. We coached, as a mediator, I was able to coach them to communicate and how they improve their communication and how they're going to complain. Finally, I remember on the last day, they hailed a cab together and went.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, so Laila, can you also share on what else? Of course, today we were focusing on sexual harassment at workplace, but mediation per se, how else can it be, and on what other basis can mediation solve cases for companies? Like, say, for example, today our maximum participants in are HR folks and also the IC folks, of course. But they would also want to know that is mediation only for the kind of disputes that we discussed today, or can it be used for other things as well in an organization? So, can you throw some light on what else can mediation be used for?
Essentially, if you look at mediation as a dialogue, a conversation where you are able to, both of you are able to adjust and readjust till you find a way to work with each other or to move apart from each other. It's I've done mediations, termination of employment termination, or any dispute where parties are not able to come to an agreement and are coming to a conflict where they need to talk to each other and rework. That's a good case for mediation. So workplace disputes are most frequently mediated in the Western countries. I have done workplace dispute mediations. So anywhere where you see this conflict, HR head, department heads are not able to get to work with each other, as I mentioned, or termination, employment termination, or senior management, or any of those can be boardroom disputes. We frequently mediate boardroom disputes or shareholder disputes. Any of these are good for mediation.
Okay. So Laila, since you mentioned about mediation in other countries, Can you show some? Can you throw some light on? Because I mean, our knowledge about the outside world is really.
Jaya, I didn't hear your question. I didn't hear your question.
Hello.
We couldn't hear your question, Jaya. Can you repeat?
Okay. So am I clear? Am I audible? Yeah. So am I audible now?
Yeah. Now you're better. Yeah.
Okay. So since you spoke about mediation in other parts of the world, can you throw some light on sexual harassment cases being dealt by mediation? What is the percentage in outside world? Because I don't think they have an IC like us, a committee like us. But how do they solve the sexual harassment cases in other parts of the world? Do they use mediation? And if yes, then what percentage of cases of sexual harassment do get solved through mediation?
You know, in America, I think most sexual harassment disputes, they go in as a large number go in through mediation, and they call it, I think, I'm not very sure, Jaya, I think it's called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So they call it discrimination. And these cases are mediated under the Equal Employment Opportunity. I similarly in the UK, but I'm not able to get you statistics. I know that some of my mediator friends, they specialize in workplace disputes, and most workplace disputes will have allegations of sexual harassment. And that's why I say that, you know, this 60%, even if you don't capture that 60%, in some form or the other, they are going to be dissatisfied employees. And somewhere it will crop up. The ugly head always raises. So workplace disputes are most often mediated, and there are studies, I'm not able to now tell you, but there are several studies which show that the workplace complaints came down, you know, the sexual harassment complaints came down dramatically when mediation was introduced effectively in organizations.
Okay.
So when organizations show up high numbers in sexual harassment, they re-examine to see if their mediation structures are not well in place.
Okay. So so Sandra, you have a question which I will answer. So Sandra's question is, if the accused employee has really conducted a sexual harassment and it's quite a serious, it's quite, you know, the nature of, I mean, some very serious nature. It's not, and even if there is a mediation agreement reached, it's still not right for the organization to take action, is what he has asked. But I would say, Sandra, that the moment a complaint comes to a HR and the HR feels that the sexual harassment is of a grievous nature or is extremely serious, I think the HR should use the discretion of not giving such complaints to mediation at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you feel it's a previous complaint, and then move it to the formal process.
Yeah. So, so Sandra, I think that's where HR should use its discretion. So please do not pass on any issues which you feel is very dangerous or is very serious in nature, and it could be very harmful for women employees at workplace. Such cases should not be closed through a settlement and should definitely see a serious disciplinary action. Okay. So, yeah, so Jonathan, thank you for sharing that document. That's really useful. And I'll also be sharing it with the audience. So, Laila, thank you so much for your time today. I just wanted So what is the difference between a mediation, arbitration, and conciliation? So is there any difference? You said mediation and conciliation is used synonymously, but how is arbitration different from a mediation and conciliation?
Good question. As I said, mediation is an understanding-based process. Understanding of what? The underlying interest, which is the need, concern, goals, priorities, pain points, emotions of the parties. Okay, so that's mediation. Arbitration is like a court, adversarial process. The facts are considered, law is applied, and the arbitrator, who is a judge, a private judge, passes a decision. Third party judge passes a decision. The conciliator is normally a subject expert. I would say to some extent the ICC's role is something like a conciliator. What the conciliator would do is study the files, give a brief opportunity to the parties to say some things, to explain what they want to explain in a brief manner. Due to the expertise, they will come out with a few proposals. The conciliator will come out with a few proposals and push the parties to accept one of those proposals. ICC will then go on and pass the award, you'll have a finding. The conciliator does not pass the award, but he uses his expertise in order to find a couple of workable proposals and pushes the parties to accept one. If not, there's no settlement agreement. Mediator spends a long time understanding and then moving into integrative bargaining, where the parties find their own mutually acceptable solution. Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So, Raktim, you have asked a question on can IC refer or recommend to mediation in between if they feel so. I would strongly recommend that once a complaint gets registered with the IC, please do not deviate from the IC proceedings. You must continue as an IC proceeding and take it to a closure. Please do not pass on a complaint once the IC proceedings have begun. Yeah. Sure. So thank you so much, Leila, for your time today. Really appreciate for sharing your thoughts on mediation. So have a lovely evening, all of you. Thank you so much.